See these three guys right here? Who are they? Okay, if you don't know who that one is or that one is, how about that one? Do you know who that one is?
Super Mario.
It's not so surprising that a little girl would recognize a video game character more than she would Bill Clinton, then President of the United States. However, the results of an American survey measuring the public's attachment to fictional and real personalities, or brands, the influential Q ratings, were quite surprising. They revealed that Mario was more popular than Mickey Mouse among children.
Mario est rapidement devenu une méga star, à tel point qu'il est même plus célèbre chez les enfants américains que Mickey. Mais pour lutter contre la souris de Disney, il ne faut pas rester enfermé dans une cartouche de jeu. C'est ainsi que notre plombier s'est installé sur les propres terres de Walt Disney dans le monde du dessin animé. Super Mario Bros.
The idea that Mario could rival Disney's all-powerful rodent without fear had never crossed Shigeru Miyamoto's mind. After all, when he learned the news in 1990, it hadn't been 10 years since he first made Mario jump on CRT screens. That's why he stayed humbled here.
On fait souvent ce rapprochement, mais c'est plutôt une idée des médias. Nous essayons de ne pas perdre notre sang-froid. Mickey Mouse a vécu pendant 50 ans, donc pour pouvoir parler sur un pied d'égalité, il faudrait que Super Mario vive encore 50 ans.
The game playing behind him illustrated the absurdity of such a comparison. Super Mario All-Stars compiled 4 of Mario's earliest adventures, the oldest of which dated back to 1985. In contrast, Mickey Mouse, with over 65 years of career history, would relegate Mario to newborn status in Mickey Mania, released a few months later. That didn't stop Disney from taking these news statistics seriously. With significant budgets and the expertise of its animators, Disney established itself as a major player in video games in the following decade. Like many entertainment giants of the 90s, the American multinational eventually returned to a more classic licensing model, subcontracting without getting too involved. Nevertheless, this clash at the top left its mark. When, in 1999, he commented on Mickey's Speedway USA, a Mario Kart-like game on Nintendo 64, Shigeru Miyamoto finally admitted to being a rival. I'm not involved, and if possible, I try not to be. Don't get me wrong, I love Disney heroes, but Disney is the kind of company I'm in competition with. This showed that, with age, he considered Mario gaining legitimacy and having a place in the pantheon of fictional icons. Revoking the rule of a jungle monster, healing an entire market, dealing with competitors ready to stoop to any lows to bring him down, and reinventing himself over and over again. Taking Mickey's throne, if it was ever to happen, would only be possible at the cost of countless trials, which Mario would have to face without cheats or warp zones. The last of those trials, tragic, would mark him for life. As for the first one, it would date back to the distant time of 8-bit consoles. Pixels tall, 16 pixels wide. It's hard to imagine getting attached to a hero with such dimensions. But Shigeru Miyamoto had more than one trick up his sleeve. Drawing on his experience with Sheriff, an arcade game he'd worked on in 1979, He found that exaggerated proportions could create an expressive figure and that a hat could avoid a crude depiction of hair. Thus, he applied these principles to his new character. The head would occupy half of the available pixels, with a large nose inspired by the illustrations of Guillermo Mordillo and Hiroshi Okanamizu, the professor character in a manga of his youth, Astro Boy. As for the headgear, he opted for a cap since he needed to portray a working-class character. He chose a carpenter in homage to his grandfather's profession. For the remaining details, technical constraints practically decided for him. The impossibility of drawing a mouth led him to separate the chin and the nose with a mustache. The need to mark a color difference between the sleeves and the body for better animation readability directed him towards going for the hero wearing overalls. Perfect. The character blended into the game's setting, a construction site, fitting with the stereotype of the typical blue-collar worker as seen in the collective consciousness. If convincing enough, the young Nintendo employee thought, this work could really launch his career. First, he had to be approved by his supervisor, who seemed exasperated when assigning him that task. Since Gunpei Yokoi became head of R&D1, responsible for constantly supplying the game and watch market, pocket LCD games of his invention, he had been overwhelmed with work. This didn't stop Hiroshi Yamauchi, the president of Nintendo, from adding more to the pile. The boss had come to the rescue of his son-in-law, who had set out to conquer America. Minoru Arakawa settled at 1107 Broadway Avenue in New York at the beginning of 1980 and founded Nintendo of America. Initially, the prospect of reducing intermediates between the headquarters and the American arcades delighted the Japanese businessman. But Radar Scope, the first title released through this branch, completely missed its mark. 2,000 of the 3,000 arcade machines produced remained unsold. Embarrassed, Minoru Arakawa turned to his father-in-law and requested the dispatch of a replacement game as soon as possible, since storing these bulky machines was very costly. Hiroshi Yamauchi, unhappy with this international false start, took drastic measures to address the problem. His disappointment with Masayuki Uemura, head of R&D2 from where Radar Scope originated, was such that he handed the project over to another division head, Gunpei Yokoi. Uncomfortable with the management style that would pit employees against one another, Yokoi complied at first, but then in turn ended up delegating the task. If that ended up stopping the bleeding, he believed the management would be satisfied. Without tormenting himself too much, he delegated a good chunk of the task to a then beginner. Then 27, 3 years after being hired by Nintendo, Shigeru Miyamoto had never been given the chance to shine. He hadn't been assigned to any of the company's 3 branches and would serve as a fill-in for various tasks. Gunpei Yokoi had called him in to help develop a Popeye Game & Watch game, inspired by the sleepwalking episode where the Gruff sailor had to climb scaffolding in order to save olive oil from Brutus's clutches. But that's when the Radar Scope issue changed the plans. To avoid starting from scratch, pre-production for Popeye ended up becoming the base to create an arcade game with a goal to quickly replace Radar Scope, shunned by the public. Miyamoto designed and conceptualized Popeye and Attack of the Beer Barrels, the project's codename, as signed by his hand on March 21, 1981. He then sent his instructions to an external company, Ikigami Tsushinki, as Nintendo would still outsource his programming. However, meanwhile, another unforeseen event had occurred. King Features, the Popeye copyright holder, deemed that the IP graphic chart was not being respected and would ultimately prevent Nintendo from using any of it. In more unofficial terms, children pop culture giants were still reluctant in presenting their heroes in arcades, often seen as dens for delinquent youth. Hence the need for Miyamoto to sketch new original characters. The question remained whether the last-minute replacement, his big-nosed carpenter, would convince American players to insert a coin into that arcade machine, the goal being to put some butter on Nintendo's bread. a New York plagued by crime and corruption, arcades had joined the ranks of notoriously disreputable places.
Ces jeux se trouvent dans des salles qui servent de lieu de rassemblement à des loupards.
The phenomenon at the time, Pac-Man, not only brought a breath of fresh air among the countless space shooters, but also helped make this environment more family-friendly. And he wasn't the only one.
Many teenagers are frank in admitting their dependency.
These games are really hard to do. It just takes a lot of skill, hand-eye coordination, and it doesn't cost as much as some other things, and it's legal.
As seen on the right of the young man justifying his love for joystick wielding, another game stood out from the Space Invaders clones, Donkey Kong. Here was the reimagined Popeye by Gunpei Yokoi and Shigeru Miyamoto. Brutus had transformed into a dumb gorilla. Olive Oil had swapped her collared sweater for the tattered dress of the damsel in distress. As for the sailor turned into an overall wearing blue collar, he was no longer a sailor, but a carpenter, due to a translation mishap. Introduced to the public as Jumpman, a name fitting the trend, the Nintendo of America team quickly renamed him Little Mario in reference to Mario Segal, the owner of the warehouse storing their machines in Seattle. Those very machines, the 2000 cursed radar scope copies no one wanted, would then basically sell themselves ever since the circuit boards were replaced with Donkey Kong boards. Better yet, while the lifespan of the arcade game would typically last for 3 to 4 months, here the success persisted, sales grew, and the Nintendo brand enjoyed unprecedented fame, eventually leading to a Donkey Kong mania.
Could you? Donkey Kong? Donkey Kong?
Now, on your breakfast table, Donkey Kong brand cereal. It will drive you ape.
This, I'm gonna jump, you're gonna crunch. Here we go.
Mario would deliver his catchphrase, "Here we go," 15 years early. But it would take a little more patience before the glory. In Donkey Kong, like in kaiju movies, the star was the monster. Just flipping through the magazines back then would prove it. Donkey Kong was on the cover, on his own. Donkey Kong would parade among other arcade giants, on his own. On the packaging of merchandise, puzzles, card games, or sticker albums, the brave carpenter was relegated to the background. It was the gorilla who would get the biggest sticker, who would get the plush toy, who would get the dedicated song. But staying in the shadow of his adversary didn't prevent Mario from taking the spotlight. A cameo in a Marvel comic, another in coloring books, his appearances eventually made him recognizable, if not sympathetic. The character had inherited Popeye's grumpy nature. His red nose seemed to suggest he would also hit the bottle. With his pronounced baldness in some drawings and being well into his 40s, he was far from the classic heroic figure. On the contrary, he would often be depicted as a sneaky, servile, and coarse character, sometimes seeming worse than the monkey.
You're not gonna stop me, you stupid ape!
Or as a victim. Tied up, knocked out, dirtied. He would suffer humiliation after humiliation in the Donkey Kong cartoon on CBS. The final blow to the poor Mario was in Donkey Kong Jr., the sequel to Donkey Kong, this time programmed internally by Nintendo. He became the antagonist, a cruel jailer preventing a son from seeing his father, a role that could never have been given to Popeye. Fortunately, the tide would turn.
Junior caught Papa, and Papa kicks the evil Mario temporarily out of the picture.
In 1983, just as he was rising to fame, Donkey Kong was called to appear before a judge. Nintendo found itself embroiled in a lawsuit filed by Universal, accused of exploiting King Kong's popularity. Admittedly, the game's alternate covers and illustrated articles, with their realistic style, enhanced the resemblance. Fortunately, the unloved carpenter proved to be a valuable asset for continuing to release games. While it was necessary to show that Donkey Kong, with supporting design documents, was merely a Popeye game whose sprites had been touched up at the last minute and that the giant ape was part of the public domain, Mario, being royalty-free, was fully available. This delighted his creator.
Mario delivers. Mario delivers, including getting Donkey Kong.
The Wrecking Crew flyers were sent for printing. Yoshio Sakamoto was feeling a little pride from seeing his sprites appearing less rudimentary on the promotional arts. Suddenly, he felt a presence behind him. "You should change your character to Mario," suggested Shigeru Miyamoto, examining the hammer-wielding guy more closely. "He's easy to draw, and people recognize him." Sakamoto, impressionable and not yet the renowned producer who would oversee the Metroid series, let himself be convinced by his more experienced colleague. The posters were redrawn and the sprites modified. Miyamoto had high hopes for Mario, whom he tried to insert everywhere possible. This proved true when looking back at the name he had given him before others chose Jumpman, then Mario. Initially, he would refer to him as Os-san, a contraction of Oji-san, a generic term meaning the guy, the man, before thinking of something more significant. He proposed Mr. Video, in an attempt to make him a recurring character, a sort of ambassador for video games who would come to mind when one would think of the medium. From the start, Mr. Video was destined to return and, moreover, to become the mean for his creator to sign the titles he would contribute to. This choice revealed his ambitions. With 4 years of industrial design training at Kanazawa College of Arts and 6 years of working at Nintendo, life had taken Shigeru Miyamoto on a different path than he had once imagined as a child, becoming a manga artist. That didn't mean he had given up on exploiting his creative talents. Making Mario his artistic signature was his way of emulating authors he admired, like Osamu Tezuka and Fujio Akatsuka, with their gimmick characters they often recycled, or Alfred Hitchcock, with his habit of making cameos inside his own movies. Driven by a need for recognition, he would seek to plant his Mr. Video wherever possible, quickly giving him a long resume.
Mario isn't risking his neck against Donkey Kong. He's up to his neck in cement in Mario's Cement Factory.
Watch out, it's gonna spill.
A tabletop game from Nintendo.
April 1983, cement factory worker in Mario's Cement Factory. November 1983, military minesweeper in Mario's Bomb Away. January 1984, referee in tennis. February 1984, warehouse worker in pinball. May 1984, golfer in golf. Mario wore many hats. He even snuck into the crowd in Punch-Out! These jobs, however, were merely side gigs. In reality, as early as March 1983, he had already landed a full-time job in a much more significant game, Mario Brothers. The character not only found his professional calling, but also family.
Mario Brothers have their hands full.
As ordered by Gunpei Yokoi, keen to incorporate two-player capability, firstly in the Game & Watch version of the game, and then in its arcade port, Mario was given a twin brother, Luigi. An identical sprite to his, as it saved memory. This pragmatism governed the entire game design and laid the foundation for Mario's distinctive universe. Yokoi wanted to evolve the jumping game formula, leading to the design of separate floors within the levels and an original way to attack enemies from below. The game became too easy since the brothers no longer had to expose themselves to danger. It was therefore decided that the shock should only immobilize enemies and that one would have to approach them to finish the job. Creatures that could get back on their feet after being bumped? Turtles, Yokoi suggested. Reptiles that crawl along pipes, revealing gigantic sewers as fantasized about New York's underground system. In this context, Mario and Luigi spontaneously became Brooklyn plumbers.
Something's coming up the plumbing for Luigi's in a bind. Giant turtles out to get him, creepy crabs are right behind. Fireflies, fever shikes, they're all coming out the pipes. Mario, where are you?
Excuse me, Lauren. I wanted to ask you about the game. Anyway, what you think about this game? And Lawrence. Hey, Lawrence. I'll get his attention.
Finally starring in his own game, Mario didn't captivate arcade audiences much, contrary to what Lawrence's attitude suggested. Graphically unimpressive in a market where technical performance prevailed, he paled in comparison to Star Wars and its vector graphics, or the interactive cartoon Dragon's Lair. However, Miyamoto had no reason to be upset. The plumber would find his audience on home consoles. Moreover, his pride was flattered by the recent wave of games featuring the ability to jump. Everywhere, in increasingly sophisticated productions, aided by the spread of scrolling screen technology, various avatars were being seen jumping into the air, jumping over gaps, and grabbing vines. The genre experience was enriched, then referred to as adventure games. Considering the jumping mechanism as his invention, Miyamoto wanted to show all these imitators that he was one step ahead and decided to let his creation mushroom into something even bigger.
真っ黄色だ。またファミコンで徹夜しちゃったもんな。おお、マリオ。ん？何々？僕のパパを探してください。
Wandering in a dark alley of Tokyo, TV host Yuri Nakamura wasn't expecting to see Mario hanging from a lamppost. He was the star everyone was talking about. The editorial staff of Family Computer magazine, which began operations in the summer of 1985 in the wake of the Family Computer's success, quickly nicknamed Famicom by players, initiated this video report broadcast on Tokyo TV. They knew this well. The mustached character kept appearing in pages in their comics, tutorials, and advertisements, while merchandise sales were booming.
何しろ彼の人気ときたらものすごい勢いである。見よこのキャラクター商品の数々。ファミコンチョコ。スーパーマリオブラザーズほか光るファミコンモデル。やったー。おっとこれはなんだ？
Friday, September 13th, 1985, far from bringing any bad luck to the launch of Super Mario Bros., marked the beginning of a cultural earthquake. People were screaming Mario, eating Mario, singing Mario. The The Japanese were passionate about the Mushroom Kingdom, and 1 million of them rushed to buy the game's strategy guide, the #1 best-selling book that year. The enthusiasm even motivated production studios to create Super Mario Bros. Picheme Kuchutsu Daisakusen, one of the first movie adaptations of a video game in history. Naturally, such excitement drew media attention. That's why Yuji Nakamura investigated. In his own way.
すいません。この子のパパを知りませんか？いやー、パパのことまではね。これは何ですか？京都の名前アツアツです。京都。
Touched by Mario's distress, the host set out to find his father. The Kyoto sweet specialty made him realize he had to travel across Japan to the former imperial capital city. After many adventures, viewers discovered with him the simple-looking main building of Nintendo, its reception staff, its corridors. Unfortunately, the man he eventually presented as Mario's father was an imposter.
お父さん！お父さん！私お父さんじゃありません。え？じゃあ本当のお父さんはどこにいるんですか？はーい。マリオくんのお父さん、とうとう出ました。ご覧ください。この方、ミキさんです。マリオくんのお父さんです。
Kenji Miki, here embarrassed on camera, was not involved in the development of Super Mario Bros. But for Nintendo, games were first and foremost a collective effort, and several employees could legitimately serve as spokespersons. Whatever the reason for Mickey's appearance on Tokyo TV that night, Miyamoto was not left in the shadows. He had recently participated in a joint interview with the creator of the successful shoot-'em-up Xevious, and occasionally appeared in Q&A sessions under the nickname Miyahan to respond, among other things, to rumors about a hidden fairy level within Super Mario Bros. Actually a bug. As for the rest, his daily life hadn't changed much, except for one detail. His first real-life son was born during that time.
私の長男がスーパーマリオブラザーズの最終段階に生まれたことは決して忘れません。周りの人々からは彼の名前をマリオにするのかと聞かれましたが、もちろんその提案には応じませんでした。息子はキャラクターがどれほど有名になったかを考えると、いや私を許さなかったことでしょう。
Mario had indeed become a societal phenomenon and established himself as Nintendo's mascot, replacing the one originally designed for the Famicom, Konkichi. To celebrate the completion of their successful cartridge, Miyamoto granted his team a mere 3 hours of celebration before moving on. It was impossible to fully grasp what they had just created in that context. A game for which, on the contrary, they chose to extend the development time beyond the usual norm. Nine months compared to the usual 3 or 6 were allotted to create an ambitious adventure on land, in the air, and underwater. Enough to make the intrusive gorilla history and assert authority over a genre Miyamoto claimed to have fathered. Super Mario Bros. Was designed as the last game released on a cartridge before transitioning to a new medium, the disk system. R&D4, Nintendo's branch entirely dedicated to the Famicom, had been honing its skills on vertically, horizontally, or multi-directional scrolling games since 1983 and wanted to conclude the history of Famicom cartridges with a bang, showcasing the best that could be done on this expensive medium believed to be on the brink of obsolescence.
テレビゲームの始まりの時代には、一人でプログラマーがゲームを作るというのが普通だったと思います。技術が進むにつれて、サウンドの音楽の専門家やグラフィックデザイナーが参加するようになってきました。
Among the R&D4's employees, future big names were at the helm. Toshihiko Nakago in programming, and Takashi Tezuka, assistant director and designer. It was him who suggested Mario for the game's protagonist, given the good performance of Mario Bros. On console. Miyamoto, Tezuka, and Nakago then formed a formidable trio, retrospectively dubbed the Golden Triangle. Another remarkable element was Koji Kondo, the team's designated composer who created the iconic theme of Super Mario Bros., influenced by the piece Sister Marion by the Japanese jazz fusion band T-Square.
このビデオテープで任天堂のテレビゲームがどのようにして出来上がるかがご理解いただけたと思います。ありがとうございました。
For his comeback, Mario was redrawn with a friendlier face, and his name was prefixed with Super, referring to his ability to gain superpowers, such as throwing fireballs, as well as his new ability to grow bigger. This change stemmed from a desire to impress. In 1985, making an impression meant having big sprites. Tests also concluded that it was more satisfying to earn a growth bonus than to start out big already. So a mushroom acting as a power-up was conceived. A food known for its magical properties in fairy tales, which served as the basis for the rest of the scenography, the Mushroom Kingdom, mixed up with elements from Mario Brothers like pipes and Koopas. The turtles were then given a fire-breathing sovereign, Bowser, who held a princess, Peach, as hostage. What Mario didn't know, as he prepared to go worldwide with the American version of the Famicom, the NES, was that he would not only save yet another damsel in distress, but would also save an entire economic branch from collapsing. Miyamoto has lost his touch, exclaimed the gamer, irritated in front of his screen. A poison mushroom in level 1? Seriously? A fake warp zone that resets everything? Not to mention impossible jumps and wind that makes them too hard to control? No, really, Super Mario Bros. 2 is poorly designed and too visually similar to its predecessor. This game shouldn't be released outside of Japan.
What game should we put out in the show?
Why should anyone have listened to him?
How long should we make a stage presentation?
Because it was Howard Phillips.
And you're about to meet the man at least partially responsible for Nintendo's popularity. He's Howard Phillips, also known as Mr. Nintendo, and for good reason. An argument could be made that Howard is responsible for making Nintendo America's best-selling Christmas toy.
To play the Nintendo Entertainment System.
After his start in logistics, managing Donkey Kong cabinet supplies, Howard Phillips rose through the ranks. He caught the management's attention with an uncommon trait among adults of his generation, including those at Nintendo: loving video games. He'd be compared to the character played by Tom Hanks in a well-known movie of the time.
Howard, are you Tom Hanks? Are you the character in Big? Who are you?
Big told the story of Josh, a teenager turned adult by a spell who would boost the toy company's profits with his useful, childlike advice. A juvenile spirit capable of understanding children's desires, that was Howard Phillips' main quality. Hence why Nintendo not only made him their American PR, but also their product analyst.
His official job title is Product Analysis Manager, which is really just a fancy way of saying that Howard plays games for a living.
I do have to keep fluent and literate in all the different games that are available, and the only way to do that is spend the hours. So on some days I'll play games all day, 8 hours or more.
I play with all of this stuff.
And then I go in and I tell them what I think.
And they pay you for that?
Yeah.
Suckers!
The job was a kid's dream. Unfortunately, Howard Phillips endured a nightmare with Super Mario Bros. 2. More of an extension than a true sequel, for super players, as stated on its Japanese box sticker, the game was the result of a hasty decision to capitalize on the plumber's success. This kind of logic frightened the American public and brought back memories of a dark era.
The home video fad of the early 80s had a spectacular rise, but the bottom fell out of the first home video boom virtually overnight. In 1983, earnings for the industry peaked at $3 billion. Only 2 years later, sales plummeted to a paltry $100 million. Industry experts like Howard Phillips blamed the poor quality of the early video game systems.
When it first came out in the early 80s, everybody rushed out to get one. It was so marvelous that you could have this in your home. It was something that all the kids were rushing to in the arcades. It was very, very enticing. Unfortunately, it was also junk.
Numerous factors contributed to the downfall of the home console market in the United States. Chief among them was the plethora of mediocre titles, notably E.T. on the Atari 2600, which became the symbol of the 1983 crash. Too many clones, reissues, shoddy work, and white-collar executives who seemed to believe that youth would endlessly shell out money.
Kids know dick. I watch them in my arcades. They stand like laboratory rats hitting the feeder bar to get a food pellet. But as long as they keep pumping in the quarters, who gives a shit, right?
Nintendo's quality positioning was a direct response to this situation. Hiroshi Yamauchi understood that console video games had more to offer than people realized. As a result, when the Famicom was exported as the NES, backed by a high-budget advertising campaign, it almost single-handedly turned the tide.
What will the future bring from Nintendo? More hits like Super Mario Brothers. Nintendo, you cannot beat us.
Oh, yeah? Great job!
Now you're playing with power.
Leading this new wave was Mario. And he had to live up to the trust he had earned, thought Howard Phillips. To avoid falling back into the pitfalls that sank the industry, any sequel, which had to come out quickly given the financial stakes, had to be smart. The previous summer, 1987, the Japanese fans flocked to Yumi Kojo, the Dream Factory, a festival showcasing future technologies. There, they met a group of merry characters created specifically to promote the event and sell merchandise. Posters, toys, and a video game, Yumi Kojo Doki Doki Panic. A Nintendo production commissioned by Fuji Television, the festival's partner, concocted in the same spirit as Mario. Naturally, since America rejected their Super Mario Bros. 2, a makeover operation began. The protagonists, modeled after characters from the Arabian Nights, were replaced by Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Peach, with a few musical nods and familiar items added: mushrooms and shells. Yumi Kojo Doki Doki Panic therefore turned into a westernized version of Super Mario Bros. 2. The series and its universe being still young, players didn't flinch one bit.
What's good about it?
Bertha, he shoots the eggs out of his nose. And also there's this part where you can't go anywhere except for fall down a pit, but you pick up this thing and this rocket appears out of nowhere and it flies to another board. It's weird.
In September 1988, the USA version of Super Mario Bros. 2 was a great success. Its secret would only be discovered years later. Nonetheless, this misadventure highlighted Mario's growing responsibility. As the face of Nintendo, expectations were increasing. He was asked to help promote games from other franchises.
Megaman est plus méga que jamais. Il souffle, Airman.
Top Gun sous un nouvel angle. Top Gun 2.
And it was becoming increasingly difficult to forgive subpar performances. Worse, Hiroshi Yamauchi could not imagine launching a console without him, despite the tight development deadlines this entailed. Mario was under pressure, as was Miyamoto, soon to be sought after by the media worldwide.
マリオ、最初にマリオブラザーズとかドンキーコンを作った時は任天堂はこんなに成功するとは思いましたでしょうか。
やっぱり運がつきまとわないとなかなか成功というのはしないですからね。任天堂が成功するかとかそういうことは思わなかったですけども。
You're very important.
ありがとうございます。Thank you very much.
This is Shigeru Miyamoto. Japanese youngsters call him the god of games. In America, he'd be pampered and probably a millionaire. But this is Japan, so why don't they seek their fortune elsewhere?
Well, we're not paid glamorously for developing games which sell well. The company is a sponsor. It encourages and pays for us to visit museums, to go to movies or even short trips so that we can get inspired. So everyone's happy to work for the company, especially as we get the prestige of being associated with it.
Nintendo's incredible growth piqued the interests of journalists worldwide. The Kyoto headquarters became a sort of Olympus of video games, the domain of the Japanese Zeus, Shigeru Miyamoto, who made his competitors feel small. Or Mr. Mario, as he would then be known. Yet, his involvement with his characters' adventures had been decreasing year after year. With the upcoming successor to the Famicom, the Super Famicom, and the increasing number of projects, his job had changed.
Est-ce que vous êtes aussi créatif qu'avant? C'est une chose qui m'inquiète. Les budgets sont grands et les sommes d'argent qu'on peut dépenser pour le développement d'un soft ne sont pas limitées chez Nintendo. Si j'étais indépendant, je m'exposerais à de grands risques. Et les décisions que je prendrais pourraient entraîner de sérieuses conséquences. Cela me ferait un peu peur. On finit par se demander si on est manager ou créateur.
Creator-manager would struggle to differentiate between the roles. He would tend to refer to himself not as a director, but as a producer. The biggest difference between the role of producer and director, according to his own words, is that when you direct, you oversee every stage of development yourself to ensure it remains your game. The director would thus be the true craftsman of the project, with an eye on every detail. The producer would bring an external perspective, enlighten young recruits with experience, intervene when a realignment is necessary, and shape a work environment catering to everyone's expression. At least, in theory. In practice, Miyamoto was struggling to restrain his need for control. Generally, developers come to me when they have things that work to a certain degree, he said. But sometimes I go behind them and notice they've lost their way. In those cases, I end up spending more time than usual in the developer's room. Regarding the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2, there was no problem letting go, as it was additional content. As for Super Mario Land, the Game Boy version from Gunpei Yokoi's team, he didn't even have a say in it. Being Mario's creator did not grant him any right to oversee anything related to the character, which remained Nintendo's property. But for the development of Super Mario Bros. 3, the true sequel to the original game, he couldn't resist getting his hands dirty. His right-hand man, Takashi Tezuka, acting as director, initially aimed to innovate by using a chip that increased the cartridge's storage capacity tenfold. But this went wrong. Super Mario Bros. 3 was initially an isometric POV game. Unconvinced, Miyamoto finally took the lead again, more attached to making the gameplay more accessible than fundamentally changing it. For instance, thinking of ways to let the player hit enemies without jumping. And it was after Tezuka imitated Mario flying by waving his arms during a meeting that they decided to allow a raccoon Mario to hit enemies with his tail and even fly. This transformation gave way to another, that rekindled the creative minds just as development was dragging. For over 2 years of hard work, Miyamoto was pushing the envelope, eager to deliver the ultimate Mario for Famicom before the next generation of consoles would arrive. The finished product would be elevated to the status of absolute classic worldwide.
Entrale al gran mundo de Super Mario 3.
Super Mario dans Super Mario 3 de Nintendo.
It's happening everywhere! Mario fans are jumping up and down over new Super Mario Bros. 3.
新しい冒険が始まった。なあなあ、僕と一緒に遊ぼうよ。僕らはマリオと強くなる。テクニカルファンタジーゲームスーパーマリオブラザーズ3。
But as with the first Super Mario Bros., satisfaction would be short-lived. Super Mario Bros. 3 wasn't even available in Japanese stores when Hiroshi Yamauchi was already promising a fourth one to accompany the Super Famicom's launch. An infernal cycle began, and Shigeru Miyamoto had no choice but to take a step back. It was the only way to handle the upcoming workload and avoid creative burnout. Unfortunately, the moment he chose to distance himself from Mario coincided with the first adverse effects of Mario's overwhelming success. Up on his cloud, he was starting to seriously irritate his peers, as he was not drifting peacefully. Instead, he was constantly taking jabs at the rest of the industry and eventually would awaken a monster.
It is the video game craze, the Nintendo craze, but this year Nintendo may be up against some serious competition.
This could be Nintendo's biggest and best super selling season. But will it be its last?
Walking through the halls of the Summer Consumer Electronics Show, Yuji Naka was visiting various booths and stopped in front of the legendary Lord British, who was promoting the latest episode of his role-playing game series, Ultima. Suddenly, a voice behind him was heard on top of that of the English developer. Is it interesting? Yuji Naka turned around, surprised, and found himself face-to-face with Shigeru Miyamoto, the man his company had designated as the one to beat. During the previous months, Sega's management had indeed tasked Naka with coding a game that could rival Mario. As a fan of the plumber, Naka started by identifying the frustrating aspects of Super Mario Bros. When you played Super Mario Bros., you always had to start over at level 1-1, he noted. There were warp zones, but you still had to redo level 1-1. It would become tedious, so I always tried to get through the level as quickly as possible. That's what inspired Sonic's initial concept. A faster, easier to control game, Naka had found his path. Meanwhile, the marketing department organized internal creative contests to imagine the lead character. A blue hedgehog with an attitude stood out. Had things remained as such, Naka would have been comfortable looking Miyamoto in the eyes. But he probably felt less at ease, knowing about Sega's advertisements to sell his creation.
16-bit arcade graphics.
Check this out, brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less. I'll take Sonic.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do? What if you don't have blast processing?
What Nintendo?
comparative advertising was a risky tactic. A misstep, and the court could get involved. Sega's Japanese executives knew this and did not agree with this approach at all. But their president had left them with no choice. His gamble relying on Tom Kalinske, a formidable American businessman known for reviving the Hot Wheels and Barbie brands. In addition to recommending a price cut for the Sega Genesis and highlighting sports games and popular IPs in America, Kalinske devised an unapologetic campaign modeled after their mascot and target audience. Teenagers, loud, insolent, and mocking. A nationwide tour was even organized in shopping malls to openly badmouth Mario in front of children.
Super Nintendo, Predator Mars, we challenge them. We think we're better than them, but it's up to you to decide.
For Christmas, I'm going to ask my mom for Sega Genesis because it's way better than Nintendo.
Whoa. Hey, there's an easier way to get color. Get a Game Gear.
If you were colorblind and had an IQ less than 12, then you wouldn't care which portable you had. Of course, you wouldn't care if you drank from the toilet either.
We at Sega have learned that some people are actually throwing their one-color portables away. We urge you to stop. There are still many practical uses for them. Fix a wobbly chair. Look, a cat massager. Bread cheese mat. Use them to tenderize meat or even as sunblock.
Sega, c'est plus fort que toi.
Should Yuji Naka apologize for this media frenzy? No, he would later say. This war was fought exclusively outside of Japan, and he had no decision-making power in his employer's strategy. And also no, as Tom Kalinske would say, because, from his perspective, Nintendo had it coming.
Mario! Mario!
Across all categories for 3 years, Nintendo had been dominating the toy sales rankings and had captured 90% of the video game market. Starting to become megalomaniac, Mario had presented himself as a messiah ruling over the United States in the Super Mario Bros. 3 commercials, knowing he was being eagerly awaited after preview images of the game were shown in The Wizard, a film that more closely resembled a product placement rather than cinematic work.
Mario Brothers!
Mario had reached peak popularity, also becoming #1 for youth TV audiences.
Et vous, réveillez-vous, c'est l'heure du fabuleux Super Mario Bros.
A hybrid TV show between live action and animated scenes was being broadcast, the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, and its partners became giants.
For your chance to win Nintendo prizes.
There was plenty to go around. Watch out for indigestion. Overdose, the late Robin Williams could have said.
But I found something a lot more scary than cocaine called Nintendo. Give him a little chocolate. Mario.
He had the Game Boy and now he has the Nintendo and now he'd have to have another unit just for that one game. Doesn't seem right. I'm going to say no. And I'm going to explain to him how people market things to make you spend more money.
To Marketing Vice President Peter Mayne, selling Nintendo is easy.
They come, they try, they like, and they buy, and it's a fun business.
Especially fun if there's no competition.
Oh, I believe that the manufacturing costs of these products have gone down significantly for Nintendo. They've just kept all that money instead of passing it on to the consumer. There's no reason for them to. There's no competition.
Nintendo fixed prices with their dealers, wouldn't allow dealers to discount.
They were able to contact all major retailers and intimidate them not to handle tainted product.
We decided if we could make a video game system with quality games, that we would be successful. We took that gamble, and now I think it's appropriate for us to reap the rewards of that gamble. That is capitalism.
Granting the power to negotiate specific in-store placements, borderline shops within stores, Nintendo of America's monopoly led to excess.
But it's a me, Mario!
It got pinned for anti-competitive practices, price fixing, and had to pay $25 million in $5 coupons to its customers. Convinced that it would get away with everything, it was almost predictable that it would attract a man like Tom Kalinske, The prospect of cutting off the head of an overconfident king ignited flames in the eyes of this ambitious CEO, fueled by the task at hand. "The dictatorship is over," he declared to the Los Angeles Times, as if about to overthrow a totalitarian regime. And he believed he could do it, because when he and his colleagues got their hands on a copy of Super Mario World, the 4th episode of the series, they were far from impressed, especially Al Nilsson, Sega of America's marketing director.
This didn't look like 16-bit. Kind of looked 12-bit, if I want to coin a phrase. It just wasn't taking it to the next level.
Did R&D force slack off to deserve this verdict? Hard to say. Takashi Tezuka, once again leading the development, although this time with less support from Miyamoto, who stuck to his role as producer, had the entire progression and map system reworked, initially too similar to Super Mario Bros. 3. Efforts were also made to highlight the Super Nintendo's power. More colors, transparency effects, rotating platforms, parallax background scrolling, and large sprites. Yoshi was also finally included, a kind of dinosaur that Tezuka and Miyamoto had in mind since 1985. Super Mario World had everything to please its fans, and sales were strong. But this new episode remained an evolution of an already proven formula and fell short. Suddenly, Mario's naive smile seemed old-fashioned compared to the rock and roll attitude of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Why can't it be more like that nice boy Mario?
To make matters worse, in theaters, people were dismayed by the mediocrity of the Hollywood-produced Super Mario Bros. Movie, a symbol of out-of-control commercial exploitation.
Ils sont frères. Ils sont plombiers. Portez-moi la terre! Il y en a cherché, vieux tétard! Plombier! Mais il leur faudra sauver la princesse.
It would then take a few years until all contracts expired before Nintendo Japan could fully take back control of its IP and adopt a more discerning strategy regarding its partners. In the meantime, at Nintendo of America HQ, people were getting angry. A Sonic plush had been hung high in the middle of the hallway, and advertisers came out with a Play It Loud campaign designed to fight Sega on its own turf with the return of Donkey Kong.
We just decided to come out here on a hunting trip. As a matter of fact, here's some of those little suckers again. Hey!
Super NES gives you 4 free games. Sega gives you no free games. Which do you choose?
Mario, even though he was selling out with a compilation of his early adventures, Super Mario All-Stars, mostly stayed in the background during that time. He explored new game genres and served as the frontman for new franchises rather than directly confronting the Blue Hedgehog and the virtual Noah's Ark of imitators that followed. In the hopes of raking in millions for their stable, a duck, squirrel, bobcat, dog, fox, bats, opossum, lizard, and other creatures try their hand at starring in a side-scroller. Some of these aspiring mascots, more daring, even ventured into the then uncharted world of 3D. After Sonic, a certain Crash Bandicoot, star of the eponymous game released on Sony's first console, the PlayStation, came to taunt Mario in front of his own home.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived. Pack up your stuff. I got a little surprise for you here. Check it out. What do you think about that?
Alas for its creators at Naughty Dog, this time, the plumber had something to respond with.
La conquête de la sacrée 3e dimension, jusqu'ici réservée aux PC de compétition, est lancée. Et Nintendo compte bien gagner la course. Le géant nippon du jeu n'est pas centenaire pour rien.
Nintendo 64 was rushed to market for Christmas.
They like the Nintendo 64.
I'm gonna cry.
Super Mario, wow.
That was not Santa Claus, it was Mummy.
Box
boxes full of clothes. CDs no one knows. When I wanted something for my Nintendo 64.
Christmas 1996. The New Yorker lamented seeing children abandon traditional toys for increasingly sophisticated virtual entertainment. Many indeed received the Nintendo 64, accompanied by its launch game, which had been described with many superlatives.
L'événement de la rentrée qu'on appelle déjà le plus beau jeu vidéo de tous les temps. Mario 64 sur Nintendo 64.
Nintendo 64 kommt und befreit die Videospiele aus ihrer flachen Welt.
It's the best video game ever created. Mr. Miyamoto's masterpiece, Super Mario 64.
Hello!
The best video game ever created. The president of Nintendo of America didn't spare his words. But when you'd have something that could shake an entire industry, why bother with nuance? Super Mario 64 was a revolution. Three-dimensional worlds that could be explored at will. Impressive, numerous, varied. A camera system that would allow players to frame the action themselves. Intuitive and innovative. Mario was more endearing than ever. At last, he would talk.
Here we go! Hello, it's Mario!
The actor, hired to portray him 6 years prior, Charles Martinet, made him surprisingly expressive, far from the plump voice he had in the cartoons.
Mi favorito es cuando no se toca el control para 30 segundos, ese Mario comienza a dormir, haciendo... Mi favorito de los sonidos.
The level of polish of Super Mario 64 was such that no one would be able to reproduce the sensations you'd feel with a controller in hand for a long time, much to the frustration of the competition. Why does this man get all the honors? I have to show the world that I am good too. Hirokazu Yasuhara was frustrated, obsessed with the idea of surpassing Miyamoto. That's what American game designer Mark Cerny said he heard during the development of Sonic 2 in 1992. Super Mario 64 sealed the deal to the point that Yuji Naka, who thought for a moment that his hedgehog was in the same league, readily admitted to being thoroughly beaten.
You've got a new Nintendo 64 game coming out, and you'd better tell us all you know.
Make me.
Look at your little plumber boy now.
What are you doing? No! Not the Mario doll hooked up to the battery cable toaster can!
Dick Cusworth from Argonaut Software, creator of the 3D platform game series Croc, would point out the gap between Nintendo and the rest of the industry 20 years later, marveling that the situation hadn't changed. Sometimes I think Nintendo can travel through time, because many years after Super Mario 64, Croc 2 still struggled with the camera system, and it worked so badly. An observation all the more enlightening since two other members of his studio saw the magic happen before anyone else, during Mario's first steps on three-dimensional legs. Giles Goddard and Dylan Cuthbert, the first foreigners to ever work internally at Nintendo. This duo, in addition to helping the company transition to 3D, built strong relationships with their Japanese collaborators. Enough for Miyamoto to attend Dylan's wedding. Close enough to grasp some of their know-how secrets. According to Giles, responsible for Mario's face in the Super Mario 64 menu, polishing is one of those secrets. If you don't play the game, you don't notice the little nuances. Nintendo teams spend a lot of time playing the games they create, with half the team playing while the other develops. That's why their games are so good on release day. No arcane secrets then. Time, money, talent, and expertise. An attention to details had become Nintendo's trademark, which, 10 years after defining the standards of 2D platforming, did it again with 3D. Before this achievement, the industry was kneeling.
The Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences is very pleased to present the first Academy Hall of Fame Award to Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto.
おめでとうございます。
ありがとうございます。
どうなんでしょう、実家っていうのは湧くもんなんですか？
いや、まだわかんないですよ。照れくさいです。
本当に宮本さんっていろんなゲーム作られてきましたよね。
そうですね。まだやりますよけど、これでなんか引退みたいに思われたら困るんで。Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the people who have worked with me to make a number of games. And on behalf of them, I thank you for this honor.
Moved, praised worldwide, one would have thought the interviewee to be happier than ever, proud of his character's achievements, for whom he had taken on the role of solo director one last time.
At the same time, we had to make him look human.
The truth was quite different. Keeping an eye to what was happening, his own children were playing Sega games. Miyamoto seemed calm when seen testing Crash Bandicoot at E3 1996, noting that the Americans were still offering linear levels. As for Sonic, while he acknowledged its qualities, he would still see it as an imitator. A passing adversary whose rivalry with Mario was mostly being fueled by the press and readers eager for drama. In fact, Miyamoto considered Nintendo's ambitions different from those of Sega. Not to say superior. Sega was looking for a way to stand out in an existing market. Nintendo created the market by investing in its research and development branch and then marketing the results of its research. The work of an explorer and a pioneer with Mario as its flagship. No longer constrained by the technical limitations of his time as he had been until then, the plumber would be pushing new frontiers and then be waiting patiently for the technology to catch up and realize his projects, even if it meant laying low for years. But even then, what prevented Miyamoto from rejoicing in his work? The reality was that he didn't care much for the hedgehog, or for the marsupial. The animal that would concern him played in another field. In his eye, in comparison, Mario was just a big fish in a small pond.
One, two, three.
Coming to strum a few chords at a concert in honor of Mario, Zelda, and Yoshi, Miyamoto, holding a bluegrass thumb pick, highlighted with his presence on stage the importance of diversifying his interests. Until then, he'd been mostly occupied with his family life, which was his priority. Having his children reach majority had allowed him to lighten his personal schedule to experiment with a wide range of activities. In 1998, he took up gardening. In 2000, he raised a puppy and built a kennel for it. Also, having entered his 50s, he would no longer put his health on hold nor continue chain smoking. Miyamoto quit smoking and took up swimming. All this in addition to continuing to make music in the studio he had set up in his garage. This return to reality did him good, unlike his job. Tired of an industry that he believed was too self-absorbed and plagued by the unpleasant feeling of playing the same tune over and over. He admitted to the press that he had become lazy and that, even when doing his best, it only represented 80% of the energy he would put in at the end of the 1980s. When asked about his future plans, Miyamoto replied that he wanted to work on something new and slow down on the money-making franchises that took up all of his days. Certainly the proliferation of Nintendo's popular franchises had gone hand in hand with a growing need to feed those IPs with sequels. By involving more third-party developers, an effort had been made to meet demand and free up time for innovation. But changes would take time, and a crisis was approaching.
しかしまだその特殊なマーケットの中、どうしてもこのみんなの集まり、この特殊なマーケットの中でちょっとした事件を繰り返しているだけに過ぎないところがあるんです。でこの「ゼルダの伝説」を僕が世の中に出しても、やっぱりその大昔の「スーパーマリオブラザーズ」の時ほどのインパクトは世の中に対してはないと思います。でもっともっとその世間一般の皆さんがこの業界に入ってきたような世間一般の人たちに、大衆と呼ばれる人たちに新しい魅力を届ける努力をするべきかと思ってるわけです。でそのたった一つのちっちゃいアイデアで思わぬ社会現象が起こる、これがエンターテインメント娯楽の産業の面白さだと思います。で我々がマリオ64とかレースゲームでその豪華なピクセルの話で話題持ちきりになってる傍らで、その持ち運びができるだけでこういうちっちゃいその特徴を生かしたキーチェーンのたまごっちっていうゲームがわずかその十数ドットの四角いちっちゃな画面の中だけで大ヒットしてしまいました。で私はその時ですね、マリオ64がやっぱりたまごっちに負けちゃったって思ったんですね。いやI'm serious.
Yeah, I'm serious.
The Tamagotchi, a virtual pet simulation that would fit in your pocket. A simple concept, easy to grasp by everyone, that became a phenomenon the same year as the release of Mario 64.
何を買うんですか？
たまごっちです。
何ですか？たまごっち。
Tamagotchi pet rock of the 90s.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
$17.99. Tamagotchi 欲しい？
Thus, Miyamoto's real rivals were more profiles like Akimaita and Akihiro Yokoi, the creators of the Tamagotchi, or that of Erno Rubik. Miyamoto had long been seeing himself as a toy maker and had been dreaming of creating an equivalent to the Rubik's Cube, a tangible object that would touch everyone and not just an elite capable of using a dozen buttons at once. Video games should be created in this spirit, he thought. In 2002, the works he cited as essential to his industry's health were grounded in reality. Bowlingual, a canine language translator named the best invention of the year by Time magazine, or Taiko no Tatsuchin and Samba de Amigo, rhythm games both. Their concepts would fit in one sentence and their gameplay was intuitive. To his great dismay, Mario had strayed further away from this philosophy. While he might have thought that the first 3D Mario was surpassed by the Tamagotchi and what it represented, he was certain of it about Mario Sunshine, the latest installment. The GameCube episode, the first directed by Yoshiaki Koizumi, who had illustrated himself for his achievements since joining in 1991, featured an adventure centered around a water pump showcasing the 120-bit fluid simulation capabilities. This did not thrill Miyamoto. I think Nintendo should make games that can be enjoyed by various types of players, and that is Mario's mission by extension, he remarked during the promotion of Super Mario Sunshine. It's a true sequel to Mario 64, which I regret in a way. Not because of the quality of Super Mario Sunshine, but because it might not attract those who want to start playing again.
Cause clean is better than dirty, and dirty's neater than clean.
The thing is that we, as game designers, often repeat the same mistake. And that's because we're too familiar. We know too much about the games that we're making. We tend to forget that actual gamers will come into it not knowing anything about the games that we've been creating. We have to force ourselves to make the software purely from the viewpoint of the game player.
His fears were justified, as sales clearly illustrated. Super Mario 64, a monumental game, sold 11 million copies. Half as many as Super Mario World, which is already declining compared to the original Super Mario Bros. This decline worsened with Super Mario Sunshine, which sold only 6 million copies. The commercial results of the consoles followed the same trend. The Nintendo 64 was a semi-failure, and the GameCube scored even worse. Stuck between two niches, Nintendo was no longer attracting hardcore gamers nor true beginners despite numerous attempts. Even the newcomer in the arena, Microsoft's Xbox, outperformed it, taking second place behind the PlayStation 2. If Nintendo's games do not stand out, then the entire creative process is futile, which made me very sad, especially during the GameCube era, Miyamoto would recall years later. The more we competed with new rivals, the more we started to emulate them. But being number one in competition, does that mean being number one in the public's eye? That was our question. Nintendo's identity crisis, amid fears of ending up like Sega, who announced they would stop manufacturing consoles after the failure of their last machine, the Dreamcast, was evident in their communication. In their 2003 marketing campaign, one of the most ambitious in their history, with sophisticated commercials, 3 words were being repeated constantly.
The maidens be released, and our princess, once again, be rescued.
Who are you?
Who are Nintendo's players? Or rather, which players does Nintendo want to reach? Inspired by his hobbies, Miyamoto thought he had the answer to break his company out of that infernal loop it was trapped in. More involved than ever in Nintendo's overall strategy, now sitting on the board of directors, he was ready to face what Hiroshi Yamauchi, retired since May 2002, described as a crucial episode for the company and its next generation of consoles. The former president, known for his provocative and dramatic statements, made this remark in reference to the next handheld console that Nintendo was about to release.
もし DS が成功すれば任天堂は大いに喜びますが、失敗した場合は地獄の底に落ちることになります。次の2年間が任天堂の運命を左右するでしょう。
The fate of Nintendo and the fate of Mario were one and the same, of course. Weightless, Buzz Aldrin was undoubtedly more at ease than Mario was. This was to be expected from the second man in history to walk on the moon. In contrast, Aldrin admitted to not knowing how to use a controller and that he was participating in this parabolic flight purely for a paid promotion. Thus, he sung the praises of the new Mario game, Super Mario Galaxy, without knowing how well deserved they were.
Super duper Mario. Right.
Plumber not only delivered a new, expertly crafted masterpiece, fulfilling once more the gaming world's expectation of him and propelling him among the stars of video games, but also succeeded in following his parent company's broader shift in strategy.
Do you know anyone who's never watched TV, never seen a movie, never read a book? Of course not. Do you know someone, maybe even in your own family, who's never played a video game? I bet you do. How can this be? If we want to consider ourselves a true mass medium, if we want to grow as an industry, this has to change.
You want a revolution? We got one.
With the Wii, and earlier the DS, Nintendo was set out to conquer the general public. The race for power was over. Renewing the way of playing and making it understandable for everyone prevailed.
Rock.
To use the terminology of Blue Ocean Strategy, a book often cited as illustrating Nintendo's chosen path, it would be smarter to invest in a low competition branch rather than getting bogged down in a war against too many factions. Sailing through the busy oceans of the gaming market, Nintendo successfully opened new routes in the scarcely exploited sea of casual gaming.
One thing that I think maybe people around the world often forget, Nintendo actually released a device that used touch as an input mechanism before the iPhone even released.
In this new market space populated with users who struggled with any complexity, the challenge for Mario was to satisfy everyone. To both reconnect with the general public and continue to assert his authority. But true to his roots, he showed versatility. Like Super Mario 128, a tech demo intended to show off what the GameCube could do at the dawn of the new millennium, Mario was more multifaceted than ever. To support the commercial success of new franchises, there were few sports left he hadn't tried, few game genres he hadn't tackled. However, fragmenting his main series was another matter, which he hadn't been forced into until now. Yes, Mario Galaxy cemented his reputation as an ambitious innovator. Yes, Yoshiaki Koizumi had made great efforts to make it more accessible than previous 3D Mario games, partly thanks to lessons learned from Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, a platforming game played with 2 bongos that he had developed in the meantime. But the commercial performance, while it halted the series' decline, remained incomparable to that of its golden age. To reach those heights again, another Mario game had to enter the scene.
What's happening, y'all? Dalen here, and we're able to catch up with a legend, none other than Mario. How you doing, brother?
Thank you very much, Dalen.
New Super Mario Brothers for Nintendo DS. Now, a lot of people can't wait to get their hands on this one. So what makes this new one so special?
You know, Dalen, there are a lot of games out there starring me, Mario. But the new Super Mario Brothers, it's like a blast from the past. It's my first new side-scrolling platform game since the day.
New Super Mario Bros. Had a title that paradoxically offered a return to good old Mario, after more than a decade since its last original 2D adventure. In the old-fashioned way, Nintendo's designers racked their brains to create ingenious courses, without the pressure to reinvent the wheel. Modernization with some 3D elements and a moveset inherited from Super Mario 64 were enough to satisfy Nintendo DS owners. Indeed, upon its release, 30 million copies were sold. A colossal number that the Goomba Crusher hadn't reached since the late 1980s. Money could flow with less creative and technical effort, he learned. Perhaps too well. Unlike his 3D counterparts, who limited his appearances to ensure a big impact each time, he adopted the opposite strategy, shelling out sequels. New New Super Mario Bros. Wii included the ability to play with 4 players on the same console. New Super Mario Bros. 2 revolved around collecting gold coins. New Super Mario Bros. U exploited the asymmetrical gameplay possibility of the Wii U. Pleasant features, sometimes anecdotal. Regulars would sometimes feel that Nintendo was operating on autopilot, feeding a machine capable of producing generic, interchangeable levels. As for the 3D Land and 3D World iteration, halfway between classic Mario and modern 3D games, they had the benefit of finally making 3D accessible to beginners. Like a landlord, concerned with doing his job well, Mario minimized risks and capitalized on his past achievements. A sign that he was starting to age.
The strategy behind this newest game is definitely spot on. Nostalgia, nostalgia, nostalgia.
Gulf War, 1991. The Iraqis were flooding the desert of Kuwait with a sea of fire, as promised by Saddam Hussein. Curiously, beneath the rubble of American barracks ravaged by the bombing, a small machine appeared unbroken by the flames. Not a tank, no. A Game Boy. Located in the museum section of the Nintendo World Store, the first official Nintendo store situated in the heart of Rockefeller Center, visitors are consistently surprised to see it function once a Super Mario Land cartridge is inserted. What better symbol to establish a reputation for excellence and reliability? A longevity that Mario celebrates every 5 years in this place since coming of age.
En plein cœur de New York, cette encre de plus de 3000 m² abrite depuis 2005 les goodies les plus recherchés par les fans de la marque nippone.
And we are here at Nintendo World celebrating the 25th anniversary of Super Mario Bros. Nintendo came out in full support of Mario, and boy do they know how to party.
We've got Mario for pictures, we've got a booth for talking about the Mario memories.
First game, 5 years old.
Literally when I was born. My brother, he was playing his NES and then he brought the game with him to the hospital.
I've grown up with Mario. It was my first video game I ever played.
Okay. That outfit, did you buy it or?
I made it.
Oh, nice.
How excited are you?
His birthdays have been occasions for him to offer a series of commemorative products. The level editor Super Mario Maker for the 30th anniversary, the Battle Royale Super Mario 35 for the 35th, not to mention the endless special editions of consoles, games, and goodies. He even splashed out on luxury items. He indulged in a custom-made watch by the Swiss watchmaker Roman Jerome, priced at $18,000 each. While not accessible to the general public, it enhanced the prestige of the character, ready to face the ravages of time. Far from weighing him down, the passage of time had instead left a precious legacy from which he increasingly drew, including for his main series.
Woohoo! Yes!
Next, let's switch.
What's this?
The levels of Super Mario Odyssey, the successor to Super Mario Galaxy, were imbued with nostalgia. Classic 3D phases and 2D pixel art phases would intermingle. Mario would traverse countries that paid homage to significant moments of his journey. The New York of his early days, making his way on scaffolding up to Donkey Kong while Pauline sang, the damsel in distress of that era, or the gardens of Princess Peach's castle from Super Mario 64, where he could stroll around in his N64 appearance. The available costumes were a testament to the great richness of his library of games. While attracting new generations remained a priority, it was a good way to give his most loyal followers a nod.
Please welcome.
In terms of loyalty, Shigeru Miyamoto was no slouch either. One might have thought he had been too busy pampering his new friends, the Mii's, delighted with the direction Nintendo took in the mid-2000s. And the truth was that he was not one to look back. However, even though he had been practically uninvolved in the development of a Mario game since Super Mario 64, he wouldn't miss his virtual offspring's birthday for the world and eagerly took a piece of level 2-2 at the Nintendo World Store. Invitations to events in his honor had been increasingly frequent, and he lost count of the times he had to re-explain the origins of his carpenter when receiving yet another award, when invited to prove his ability to complete the first level of Super Mario Bros. In the context of promoting Nintendo, or for a talk show.
Miyamoto, you are a god. I have one question. What is your obsession with mushrooms and mustaches?
Shigeru Miyamoto, what do you think of my performance? Yeah.
It was the least Miyamoto could do, considering the powerful power-up Mario had been for his career. At a time when the profession of game designer did not exist, he claimed at the 20th anniversary of the franchise, Mario invented and validated this role for me. Thus, personally, he has been my guiding star. An invincibility star, giving him the strength to impose his more artistic rather than purely technical approach when games were still designed only by programmers. As a token of gratitude, he would eternally reserve a special privilege for Mario.
私のキャリアの中で多くのキャラクターを作りましたが、採用するときはいつもマリオの顔を添えて描いています。
Approaching the age of 70, it was only natural to dedicate his final years at Nintendo to his favorite character. On this ultimate path would again stand the one who was once designated for him as a rival. No botched countdown, misplaced confetti, or other mishaps could diminish Miyamoto's enthusiasm.
Here we go! Okie dokie!
We are Mario!
Tirelessly for each of the theme park openings, he replicated Mario's iconic jump and rushed like a tanuki when called upon. In recent years, he had been struggling to bring this project to life, said Shinya Takahashi, head of Nintendo's entertainment division. Consequently, game creation would occupy a minor place in his schedule. As Nintendo expressed its desire to evolve into an entertainment company, not just a video game company, the Japanese creator was thrilled at the idea of exploring a new domain and bringing his enchanted kingdom to life. Welcome to Super Nintendo World. Please enter through Peach's castle and you will reach the central courtyard dominated by Mount Beanpole. On your left, admire Bowser's castle, which houses the Mario Kart attraction. On your right, Yoshi's will take you on a relaxing excursion. Need a pick-me-up? All sorts of dishes await you at Kinopio's Cafe, lovingly prepared by Toads, from mustache burgers to piranha plant salads. Equipped with your connected bracelet, you will notice that, as a game designer, Shigeru Miyamoto has sprinkled the park with gameplay elements. Delighted to bring his expertise by making each ride interactive, and observing that theme park design shared similarities with video game design, he stated that this sharing of experiences will probably be the most interesting way to get involved in the coming years. Before adding that Super Nintendo World, a themed area inside Universal Studios, was the result of a closer collaboration than the usual transmedia franchise partnership. There was a desire not to reduce his park to a mere licensing venture and to go toe-to-toe with the leader in the market.
As you can see, I am feeling that Disney spirit right now. I got my ears on. We're standing in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle as the sun comes up, so it's a magical moment. And of course, we have Mickey right here. Mickey and his friends are running around the park right now, getting everything ready for the 100th anniversary.
At the heart of Main Street, USA and Disneyland, efforts have been underway to install a very special platinum statue of Mickey Mouse. The Walt Disney Company had been preparing to grandly celebrate its foundation a century ago. A spectacular longevity that reminds us that Mario was almost a newcomer compared to Mickey Mouse, according to P.A.U.L. The Disney specialist, based on his book The Assassination of Mickey Mouse, stated that, despite the age gap, the two avatars shared many similarities. Both had to abandon their mischievous original character to appeal to a broader audience. As soon as the majority is taken into account, he asserted, all edges soften and all traits simplify, sometimes to emptiness. Mario couldn't escape that. The responsibility of a character would grow as their audience expands. The influence Mickey would exert on children worldwide was such that it inevitably pushed him to banish any sort of ambiguous action and become a positive example. Doing the same is a difficult task for Mario, given the disastrous mainstream opinion of video games. As early as 1990, Miyamoto admitted to having opened his eyes to the issue upon becoming a father. According to him, when parents would see their child reading a book, they'd consider it a good thing. But seeing them playing a video game, they would feel guilty in some way. His wish was then to do everything possible to make gaming seen in the same positive light as reading was, to the point that parents would rejoice the day their children were old enough to hold a controller. 30 years of misconceptions and scandals later, the mission didn't seem entirely accomplished to him. Many parents want to prevent their children from playing video games, he lamented to the Nikkei newspaper in 2019. But these same parents have no problem allowing them to watch Disney movies. We can't seriously compete with Disney unless parents start feeling comfortable with their kids playing games. 4 decades of clinging to the flags of the toughest levels hadn't been enough. Mario was still too confined to his original medium, thought P.A.U.L. He acknowledged that Mario had experimented with manga and animation, but certainly not to a similar level. He remains a video game character. Mario is not a comic book character, whereas Mickey is capable of being entirely that. Those words were spoken in 2016. That was before Super Nintendo World. And, most importantly, that was before the Minions got involved.
It's multi-generational, right? Mario is this pillar that forged the foundation of the childhood of my generation, of my kids' generation. There's so many people, all of them remember the first time they played Mario.
I spent most of high school not making friends and playing this game instead.
But you're also having those moments of, look at that, I remember that from this game. So it's really like a trip down memory lane.
Product of Illumination Studios, Super Mario Bros. The movie would be the third highest grossing animated film of all time. Mario joined the ranks of royalty, closely following The Lion King and Frozen 2. This was a sweet revenge after his unsuccessful attempt in Hollywood 30 years before. This triumph delighted fans of the plumber, and more fan arts showed up online pitting him against the mouse.
Look at the ratings. I left you in the dust, you stupid rat. Don't be a little pussy and fight. It's no longer Disney. I am the boss man.
Nintendo's growing versatility made the comparison tempting. However, there were profound differences in ambitions, culture, and background, according to P.A.U.L, who concluded his analysis with the following terms. Nintendo does not want to be Disney. Nintendo wants to stay Nintendo. It is important to recognize that some are destined to perfect their specific craft, not expand. Every company doesn't have to look to expand like Disney, by fighting on multiple fronts, such as theme parks, media, or merchandising, highlights the essayist. The efforts required should not be underestimated, both in terms of sprawling management and in the acquisition of particular and very different skills. When Nintendo teams sought to enter new markets, they preferred to get external partners involved rather than fundamentally change the operations of their parent company. Illumination for films, Universal for parks. They compensated for the resulting lack of control with significant involvement and setting high standards.
Lego Mario time!
It took 5 years of development with Lego to validate a sufficiently differentiating set concept. Despite the infinite opportunities available, the Kyoto-based firm wanted to preserve its prestigious image, not rush to meet every market demand. If Nintendo would sometimes fall for the trends, it was always done reluctantly. The failure of the Wii U, the successor to the Wii, and the decline of its portable consoles in the face of the rise of mobile games forced Nintendo to revise the sacred exclusivity of Mario on its platforms to sell his game on smartphones. The success of the Switch that followed allowed the Japanese company to move away from this strategy and return to a more in-house corporate culture that would not allow its path to be dictated. This old-school philosophy, in some respects, was both appreciated and seen as detrimental. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, the latest in the series that revived the 2D platformer genre, was presented in the same format that players had always known, an adventure with a beginning and an end. Commercial projections were met, indeed, but it was no longer enough for the plumber to occupy a significant part of players' childhoods in this era of ever-evolving games. Selling 40 million cartridges in 1990 made Mario the king of the world. In 2024, he was one leader among many. The very notion of selling the game was almost obsolete for those who wanted to dominate the market on a large scale, with a switch in focus on the number of active users. Of the 20 million buyers, how many would continue to explore the Flower Kingdom of Super Mario Bros. Wonder years later? The cubic plains of Minecraft, however, were still being explored by hundreds of millions of players more than a decade after its first beta. a worrying sign for the reign of Nintendo's mascot, which was not unrelated to his recent diversification. In this matter, and despite the differences, Mario might have been more destined to resemble Mickey than one would have thought. Disney also waited until it was against the wall to adapt to its environment, such as when it had to launch a streaming platform in response to the Netflix threat. Would Mario manage to stay at the forefront in an ecosystem that had become unrecognizable? This question led to another. Would he manage to pass the decisive, inevitable stage that Mickey faced at his age? An ultimate level to cross. But which one?
As a man who is always thinking ahead to the next thing, I'm curious, where do you see the future of Super Mario going?
Well, it's impossible to know the future. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. I don't even know if I'll be alive. But I'm fine. I'm fine.
May 25th, 1955. Hunger strikes, demonstrations. The Nintendo Workers' Union was ready to do anything to stop factories from shutting down and the ongoing layoffs. The new president wouldn't back down either. Hiroshi Yamauchi, heir at 22 to his grandfather's company, a playing card factory, wanted to diversify its field of activity and, in the process, earn respect.
地位のつながりだけで会社のトップとして扱われることが許せなかった。何よりも私は彼らが私を見くびることが間違っていることを示したかった。
With defiance, Yamauchi crushed the protest movement before taking Nintendo in a decisive direction a few decades later. To everyone's surprise, when he retired on June 5th, 2002, he did not choose a family member as his successor, but the person he deemed the most qualified.
Here we go!
And although he passed away during a low point for his company on September 19th, 2013, his teams sent him a reassuring message to the sky with the incredible prosperity that followed. Nintendo would survive him. One day, Mario might have to do the same for Shigeru Miyamoto. What do you think Nintendo will be like without you? Nintendo existed long before you were born and will exist long after you are gone. What quality do you think Nintendo needs to protect in order to keep being Nintendo? It's hard not to feel as if you have one foot in the grave when faced with such questions. But far from turning ever grayer, Miyamoto is serene. He replied,
任天堂は私たちの存在よりもはるかに前から存在しており、私たちの後も存続するでしょう。私は確信しています。年々増え続ける競合打者は、任天堂がいかにして任天堂らしさを持つかについて、より深く考える機会を提供してきました。 社長もご時代で、ゼネラルマネージャーも同様です。私たちは任天堂の精神が成功裏に引き継がれるような方向を選びました。私はそれについて心配する必要はもうありません。
Knowing yourself, understanding your strengths and weaknesses could only happen through adversity. With a well-stocked trophy case, Mario brilliantly led this quest, staying as far away as possible from fleeting trends that pushed studios to copy each other. Prioritizing quality over quantity had allowed him to remain prestigious, to justify the purchase of a console all on his own, even if it went against the trendiest of profit logic. Mario's whole history, as dense as it may be, remains that of a birth. A tutorial. The plumber's childhood shall really only be over with the departure of his father, his guardian angel who has ensured so far that he would be treated with care. Hopefully, this introduction will last as long as possible.
物の品質は創造されてから数十年後も引き続き需要があるかどうかで評価されるという学習を持っています。
Hey, Pluto! Here she comes!
ウォルト・ディズニーはディズニーが提供した全てのものの創造者ではありませんが、企業が持続的なシンボルを築くことができるというアイデアは私が尊敬しているものです。ついに任天堂のキャラクターと遊んでいた世代が同じキャラクターで自分の子供と遊ぶ時が来ました。この超重生は貴重ですね。
Look at me, 'cause I'm sitting on top of the world.